A very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of our show Africa Today, our show bringing you all the latest news and events happening inside Africa. I'm Angie Meher joining you for today's edition of our show, and as usual we begin straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines, beginning with news from home, where the Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation cautioned against hasty, undisciplined institutional steps regarding Nile water governance. Speaking at Nile Day, an event in South Sudan, he asserted that a comprehensive consensus is the only viable path for the region. We have more details in this report.
Speaking in Juba, South Sudan for the 20th Regional Nile Day and the 27th anniversary of the Nile Basin Initiative (NBI) on Sunday, Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation Hani Swalem delivered firm diplomatic message. Egypt remains committed to a collective future, but rejects any framework that ignores the concerns of the basin's majority. At the heart of the tension is the Cooperative Framework Agreement (CFA), often called the Int'l Agreement. While several upstream nations have signed the accord to seek a greater share of water, Egypt and Sudan have historically sought to protect their existing water quotas and maintain a requirement for prior notification before upstream projects begin. Egypt says the CFA is not a rigid document and must evolve to ensure mutual satisfaction. In a statement, Swalem emphasized that the consultative process launched by the Nile Council of Ministers is the only practical path to transition into a new era of cooperation. He noted that countries currently outside the CFA, which include Egypt, represent more than half of the total population of the Nile Basin. He said any future arrangements must reflect collective ownership and comprehensive consensus. He also pointed to a special committee report suggesting that the CFA is a flexible tool that can be amended via Articles 35, 36 and 37 to accommodate the well-founded concerns of all member states.
And for more news, Egypt is amongst Africa's largest solar energy markets following a 500 megawatt capacity boost. This came in a report released by the Global Solar Council titled Africa Market Outlook for Solar PV 2026 to 2029. We have more details in this report.
The Cabinet's Information and Decision Support Center (IDSC) highlighted a report by the Global Solar Council titled Africa Market Outlook for Solar PV 2026-2029. The report identifies Egypt as a top-tier market and a primary driver of renewable energy growth across the continent. Egypt solidified its leadership position by adding 500 megawatts of solar capacity in 2025. This growth is part of a broader trend where the country is making significant strides in integrated solar energy and storage solutions. A key milestone in this transition was the 2025 launch of Egypt's first large-scale hybrid solar project, which features 1.1 gigawatts of solar capacity, supported by a 100 megawatts over 200 megawatts battery storage system. According to the report, such hybrid projects represent a structural shift in Egypt's energy mix, providing enhanced grid stability and supply flexibility. This transition positions Egypt as one of the first African nations to move from traditional solar reliance to advanced storage integrated systems.
And Egypt is seeking to finalize a trade route that links Cairo to Cape Town. This road aims to reconnect the continent from the Mediterranean to the Cape. We have the details in this report.
Egypt is laying stretches of a 10,000-kilometer project to reconnect the continent from the Mediterranean to the Cape. In late 2025, Mohamed Mustafa, an Egyptian Deputy Minister of Transport, announced that about 80% of the Cairo to Cape Town highway had been completed. It is a transcontinental corridor that, after leaving Egypt, traverses Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana and South Africa. Egypt is primarily funding and completing the sections of the Cairo to Cape Town highway that lie within its own territory. The corridor itself is a patchwork of national segments across multiple countries under the African Union's Trans-African Highway (TAH) framework. Other countries along the route are responsible for financing and constructing their own sections.
And for more on this, we're delighted now to be joined over the telephone by our guest, Dr. Mohamed Ezaby, the International Relations Expert in Arab African Center for Strategic and Political Studies. Dr. Mohamed, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time. Now, let's start first by describing the Cairo to Cape Road and the economic impact of such a development project. This project has been in the works for many, many years now.
Well, we can say that the road of Cairo Cape Town is very important according to the trade in Africa. This plus 10,000 kilometers route connects North Africa to South Africa. It helps trade, jobs, and growth across many countries. Especially that would have many benefits like lower transport costs. Moving goods by road become much cheaper than by sea or air for many items. Transport costs in Africa are very high now, often double or 3 times more than other countries. So that road make it lower cost. The highway reduced these costs. Goods become cheaper for people, more buying and selling. Also increase in intra-African trade.
Yes.
Especially that Africa trades very little with itself, only about 15 to 20% of total trade inside Africa. Better route, faster and easier movement of goods between countries make it higher than 15%. More trade between Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, South Africa and others supporting the African continental free trade area goes to make one big African market. Some studies say better corridors like this can put trade by 30 to 50% in connected areas.
Indeed. Now, Doctor, you've spoken about how you see this road as a main contributor to boosting intra-African trade on a larger scale. What are some of the challenges in this regard, Doctor, especially, you know, with issues related to protecting, for example, domestic markets between African countries?
Well, the main challenge is security. Sudan has war and the conflict. Many avoid it now or fly over. Some parts of Ethiopia and borders can be risky. Borders also very slow long queues with many people, sometimes bribes or extra fees. Visas, need visas for almost every country.
Dr. Mohamed, I was actually speaking more about the economic part, you know, with every country trying to protect their domestic markets, their production, their trade routes. How do you see such a project affecting this? What are some of the challenges in order to allow for inter-African trade and exchange as well?
Well, we can say that this would can make changes gulfs between African countries, especially we know the variety of products in African countries. All countries need each other, especially in African trade center. They need to cooperate together and raise the exchange of goods between each other. So by this route, for example, Egypt can send some goods to Tanzania and take another goods from Tanzania. It makes it more easier for African countries to raise the extra trade, and especially if the African countries reduce the fees and make the borders so easy to pass the borders without visas for trucks. We can say that the road links big economic countries, especially Egypt and South Africa, with middle ones. So more trade and movement, more business activity, higher national income, many things can change in African countries by this route.
Indeed. Also, Doctor, economic models have suggested in the past that transport corridors between countries often create what they've called a tunnel effect, where wealth flows along the highway but doesn't really spread to the surrounding regions. How can nations involved here and African countries involved in this project ensure that this road develops and also helps and assists local communities, issues related to agriculture and trade, to benefit from such a project?
Well, first we must know how this route divides into main parts. The first part is from Cairo to Sudan border. Second, Sudan to Ethiopia, then Ethiopia to Kenya, Kenya to Tanzania, Tanzania, Zambia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, till we reach to South Africa. So, if each country try to make the best route in his part, in their part, so we can link these parts together till we reach to Cape Town, and it takes about, it makes the journey from Cairo to Cape Town take from 5 to 10 days in the future, especially if the route quality is like the route in Egypt now. So all African countries must support this project by make the best facilities to make the best route in their part. We can, if we explain the route conditions, we can say the part from Egypt to Ethiopia is a good highway. So we need the last route parts to be the same like Egypt and the part from in South Africa.
Right, indeed. Now, Dr. Mohamed, we've also seen a lot of investments by China, as it has invested in the African infrastructure through its Belt and Road Initiative, of course, and discussions about possible renewed United States and European Union interests, for example, the Lobito corridor. Do you see this? Do you see Africa becoming, a battleground, if you may, for influence between global powers, and how can this influence the construction of such Cairo to Cape Road?
Well, we can say that all times African countries in a particular European need the sources of African countries. United States need to take these sources. Also China try to put their hand on the African countries, especially the African countries have many resources, especially minerals and oil. So all the world power countries try to put their hand on African countries. But by the way of Cairo, Cape Town, it make it change it. It make the African countries to depend on each other. His Excellency President Fattah al-Sisi always say that we need African decision for African countries. He wants to make a great relation between African countries, especially the last 10 years. We saw how the relations between Egypt and African countries developed than the last years before that 10 years. So if Egypt succeeds to make a good relations with African countries, especially in the economic field, the African countries will change to the best and be one of the richest countries in the world.
Absolutely. Now, also, Dr. Mohamed, we've seen since the Cairo-Cape Road passes through many countries, like you mentioned, do you see a balance, a trade balance being achieved between, of course, the grand vision of the African Union and African unity between these different countries? And what, in your opinion, can each of these countries that will have the road pass through them offer in order to increase such African unity and trade ties?
Well, first, before we talk about the African unity trade together, we must put an end to the struggles in African countries, especially the root parties from Sudan, parties from Ethiopia, and there are countries of struggle. So if we put an end to this struggle, so we can start to think how to develop our economic together as African countries. We can say that the Cairo to Cape Town route is the African biggest dream route. Up till now, it's lost the dream from Mediterranean to South Africa. It will be real development between the African countries. If we stop struggle in African countries and make economic unity between African countries, it will raise the standards of living for all African people by development and economic exchange.
Now let's talk a bit about some of the regulations, Dr. Mohamed. How do you see issues related to laws, legislation, as well as the issue of digitalization being employed in this specific case to ease procedures regarding operating the road?
Well, I think that African countries need to make that route first face the challenges for the street. Yeah. They must face the challenges, especially, as I said, the security, affordance, and visas, whether fuel service and vehicles. All of these are challenges faces this week. The African countries, the African unity, must treat Wimberley route as a separate unity out of the African countries. It's used for only for trade and for security by any country passes the way from it. Also, every country supports this route by fuel stations. So, if the African unity succeeded to separate that route from the policy of other African countries, it will be a succeeded corridor, and it will be great, especially that Egypt is the center of the world, and the Suez Canal, and many goods can come from Europe to Egypt and transmitted to African countries to Roosevelt.
Absolutely right. We'll leave it at that. I'd like to thank you very, very much. Our guest, Dr. Mohamed Ezaby, the International Relations Expert, Arab African Center for Strategic and Political Studies. Thank you, sir, for your time and your insight, and for joining us on today's episode of Africa Today. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for joining us.